Hi, guys. All right, we're talking a little bit. I'm going to give you an introduction to history. If you're listening to me right now, that means that you have your history activity book out, you have your history book out, you kind of looked at your pages 226 to 229, and you've looked at your activity pages 159, 160, so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. You're going to be reading about the election of 1912. You're going to be reading about the split in the Republican Party. And by splitting the votes, this walked in Woodrow Wilson to become our next president. Notice he did not even receive the majority of the votes within the American people, yet he became president. So that split on the Republican Party really had some consequences. So make sure you take note of that. When you're doing your activity page, all of the information that you need to complete that page is there within the graph and on the map. So make sure you complete that. You're going to read about Woodrow Wilson. He was the son of a Presbyterian pastor. He believed that people were inherently good, and that once they are presented with the idea that, hey, you're not doing something quite right, that people wanted to do right. And that's a lovely thought process, but it's not always the truth. Sometimes people don't want to do right. And I said that out loud, but it's true. And, it's a nice way to think, but when we operate outside of the will of God, that's not always the way we're thinking. So you're going to see that about Wilson. Again, we're seeing the government, through the progressive idea, the government, I'm educated, let me tell you, and that's not always a good thing to have the government tell you, especially when they are not making their decisions based on scripture. So kind of watch that. You're also going to be reading about John Dewey. He was also progressive, and he kind of pushed a new education movement. And there were some good things to come out of that, but there was also some not so good things to come out of that. He felt like there was too much memorization happening in school. And I'm sure there's some of you guys in the background going, yes, there's too much memorization. Unfortunately, that's how we remember things. And if you can remember all of the levels of your Fortnite game, then you can remember your American presidents. You memorize that, okay? So he talked about that. But the thing with Dewey was that he was what we call a secular humanist, which means that he didn't believe in God. That means he was an atheist. It also means that he thought that man could perfect himself. There was no God. There was no need for this idea of sanctification that happens when you come into a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ. So he really felt like man was the know-all, end-all. He believed that man had the supreme understanding and man had the supreme wisdom. The problem with that is when you have one man over here that thinks he has a supreme knowledge and a supreme wisdom, and one man over here who thinks he has supreme knowledge and supreme wisdom, yet they don't think the same way, that's where arguments and that's where wars come from. And that's what happens when we say, we're going to do it the way I think is right, or no, we're going to do it the way I think is right. And there's a problem with that. When man makes himself to be God, basically, and that's what Dewey was doing. Kind of funny about the 1950s, his idea of education and education within the classroom came to a halt because guess what? Trying to do things with just what the kids wanted to do and just what the kids wanted to happen resulted in some really bad testing scores, and kids were not learning and performing the way that they should, and people kind of revolted against Dewey. So you're going to be learning about that. Another thing you're going to be learning about is the 16th and 17th Amendments. The 16th Amendment was amendment to the Constitution. I don't know how this sucker passed, but basically saying that the federal government can tax its citizens based on their income to support the government. So that was the 16th Amendment. Like I'm saying, I am not so sure how that sucker passed. And then there was a 17th Amendment saying that the power of electing your officials to go and represent you passed to the people and not to your state government, allowing the people to have a greater voice in making sure that they felt they were heard in Washington. The final thing that you're going to read about too, and it's again where you talk about progressive humanism, is you're going to read at the bottom of 229, you're going to read about in Mexico, there was Huerta, who was the president, and people were not liking Huerta as the president in Mexico. So Wilson also didn't like the idea that Huerta was the president of Mexico. So he sent our American troops. Guess what they liked even less than Huerta? American troops up in their business. And so we need to understand, again, when you have one person who thinks, nope, this is the way it should be, how dare you tell me that this is the way, this is our country, we're going to do it our way. And people were beginning to understand that, or America was starting to have to understand that not everybody wants you in your business. And that was a real big pushback to the United States and the idea of us just putting our troops wherever we thought the American way should go. So I hope you enjoy reading this. Again, remember, these are all men, and all men don't make perfect choices all the time. Neither do we make perfect choices all the time. We can come back and look at it and maybe grow and learn from them. And that's what history is about. So we can learn about the great steps of people that came before us so that we can continue with those great steps, and that we can learn about those mistakes so we're not destined to repeat them. So enjoy this history, election of 1912, Woodrow Wilson, John Dewey, and the progressive movement as it continues. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.